It wasn't the way the bobcat moved that caught her eye. It was how it didn't. The animal stood on the edge of the backyard, motionless, wild, but watching. Not the house, not the trees, just the toddler sitting in the grass, legs tucked under him, stacking rocks like he always did after breakfast. For 3 mornings in a row, it had been there. The first time, the mother thought it was a trick of light, a shadow shifting through the woods, a deer maybe. But by the second morning, the silhouette was undeniable. Low to the ground, ears pointed, tail twitching slightly. And now, today, it was closer. Still, like it was waiting. She didn't scream, didn't run. Instead, she stepped out onto the porch, slowly, bare feet pressing against the old wooden planks. The screen door clicked softly behind her. The bobcat didn't flinch. Neither did her son. He sat, back turned to the animal, humming to himself as his little fingers lined up smooth stones on a patch of dirt. The woman's breath caught in her chest, torn between instinct and disbelief. But she stayed silent, afraid even the sound of concern might break whatever this was. The breeze picked up. Leaves stirred at the edge of the property line, and the bobcat blinked, once, then turned and disappeared into the trees, like it had only come to witness something, and then was done. That night, she barely slept. The next morning, she woke before dawn and waited. The child wandered outside again, blanket in hand, and sat in the same spot. And once again, at the edge of the woods, it came. But this time, it didn't stop. It stepped forward, 3 slow, deliberate strides. The light hit its fur, a tawny mix of dusk and earth, matted in some places, dusty in others. It looked thin, older maybe, but not sick. Its gaze wasn't hungry. It was searching, and still the boy didn't turn. He lifted one rock, turned it in his palm, and placed it gently beside the others. Then he paused, turned his head slightly, and smiled. Not at his mother, but toward the trees. The bobcat tilted its head. It didn't make a sound. Neither did he. But something passed between them. By the time the boy looked back down at his little collection, the animal was gone again. The mother stepped forward, cautious, every maternal alarm in her bones on edge. She crouched beside her son and whispered, "What are you doing, baby?" He just looked up, blinked slowly, and answered with something that chilled her. "She listens." The mother froze. "Who does?" He pointed toward the trees, to nothing. Then he went back to stacking the rocks. The rest of the day, she kept him close. She locked the doors, kept the curtains drawn. She called her husband at work. He told her it was probably a fluke. Maybe the bobcat was sick or disoriented. But that didn't explain the boy's calmness, or the way the bobcat kept coming back. By sunset, she stood at the edge of the lawn herself. No animal in sight. Only the rustle of distant leaves. Only the quiet weight of being watched by something just beyond the tree-line. The next morning, the same. The bobcat, the boy, the rocks. But now, the child had added something else. Twigs, each one placed between the stones. 3 long, 1 short. 2 short, 1 bent. No pattern she could recognize, but he placed them carefully, like it mattered. And the bobcat responded. It moved closer. Saturday. Watched. At one point, it pawed gently at the dirt, then mirrored the shape the boy had just made. The mother felt her stomach turn. This wasn't random. It wasn't some wild creature stalking prey. It was interaction. She began filming, shaky hands, from the bedroom window, zoomed in, caught the arrangement, caught the stillness, and then the movement. The bobcat dragging a twig into a mirrored shape beside the boy's layout. Her hand clutched the curtain tightly. It couldn't be. It couldn't. But deep down, something older than logic stirred inside her. A knowing. A mother's sense. This wasn't a coincidence. Something was being said, and she was not invited to understand it. She stopped recording after that. Not because it wasn't worth capturing, but because filming it made it feel more unbelievable. Too strange to explain. Too sacred to interrupt. The footage stayed on her phone, untouched. Not sent to anyone. Not shown even to her husband. She didn't know what she'd say if she did. I think our son and a bobcat are communicating, so instead, she watched. From behind windows. From the porch. From the edge of the garden where the sunflowers used to grow before the drought. And every morning, like clockwork, it continued. The bobcat would arrive. Always from the same line of trees. Not stalking. Not prowling. Just arriving. And the boy, always in that same spot, barefoot in the morning dew, crouched low in the grass, would place his rocks and twigs in new shapes. She started documenting the patterns, quietly, at first with pencil and paper, then with photos. Some days, they looked like arrows, other days like boxes or loops. One day, a spiral, the next a crooked star. What unsettled her most wasn't the shapes themselves. It was the repetition. When the boy made the same pattern 3 days in a row, the bobcat responded differently each time. The first time, stillness. The second, a slow blink, then a paw reaching forward to shift a single twig. The third, the bobcat circled the boy once before walking away. It wasn't mimicry. It wasn't instinct. It was conversation. The child had started speaking less to his parents, too. Not in a withdrawn way. He was still smiling, still playful, still humming to himself during bath time. But when they asked him about the cat, he would only shrug. "She's not a cat," he finally said one evening. The mother looked up from her laundry basket. "What is she then?" The boy looked thoughtful for a moment, then just said, "She's waiting." "For what?" But he didn't answer. He went back to his toy truck, rolling it slowly across the wooden floor, whispering something too soft to hear. That night, she stepped outside alone. The moon was thin and pale. The grass had begun to dry into brittle patches beneath her feet. She walked to the edge of the yard, arms folded tight, her heart not racing, but listening. She didn't call out. She didn't make a sound. But within minutes, the shape appeared. Not in a rush. Not with caution. The bobcat came forward, stopped just before the light hit its face, and waited. There was something old in its eyes. Not human, not tame, but not wild either. Just aware. The woman whispered, barely audible, "I don't understand what you want." The bobcat didn't move. She took one step forward. The animal stayed. Another step. Then, a small sound behind her. The creak of the screen door, the soft shuffle of bare feet. Her son. He didn't run. He didn't call out. He walked past her, slow and steady, as if they were all part of something rehearsed. He carried a flat rock in his hands, smooth gray and marked with a bit of red chalk. He placed it gently on the ground between him and the animal. Then he stepped back. The bobcat moved forward. It didn't sniff. It didn't paw. It looked. Long, hard. Then it turned and walked back toward the woods, pausing once before it disappeared into the trees. The next day, it rained. Hard, cold, out of season. The yard became muddy. The rocks scattered. The twigs floated in shallow puddles near the garden hose. No bobcat. The boy didn't go outside that morning. He sat by the window with a blanket draped around him, watching the trees sway. "She won't come today," he said simply. "Because of the rain?" "No," he replied. "Because she's trying to remember." The mother didn't ask what that meant. She just watched the sky with him, unsure whether to feel relief or grief. By sunset, the storm passed. The ground steamed gently under the returning sun. And just before dark, she saw it again. Not the bobcat, but something else. Small prints. Fresh. leading from the tree-line to the spot where her son always sat. And back again. But no rocks this time. No twigs. Just a single pine cone, left upright in the middle of the clearing. Balanced, not fallen. Placed. She didn't tell her husband. She didn't call anyone. Instead, she picked up the pine cone, turned it in her hand, and looked out into the woods. And for the first time, she felt like she wasn't supposed to understand. She was only supposed to witness. The days that followed blurred into each other. Every morning, the boy rose before the sun touched the grass. He didn't speak. He didn't ask permission. He simply walked barefoot to his place beneath the birch tree, hands tucked behind his back, eyes scanning the soil as if searching for something only he could see. The mother stayed inside now, not out of fear, but reverence. Whatever this was, it no longer felt like danger. It felt sacred. From the kitchen window, she watched him arrange. No longer just rocks and twigs. Now it was seed pods, fallen feathers, curled leaves. He placed each one deliberately, like they meant something. Sometimes he'd undo his own arrangement, shake his head softly, and start again. Other times, he'd sit back and wait. And always, the bobcat came. It never rushed. It never played. It arrived, observed, moved once, then vanished. Each visit seemed more precise, more ritual than routine. Sometimes it brought something. A stone scratched white, a clump of fur, once a cracked eggshell, hollowed and clean. And always, the boy would acknowledge it. With a nod, a tiny touch, a soft hum under his breath, too rhythmic to be random. By now, the mother had filled a journal with sketches and notes. She drew every pattern the boy made, photographed every object left behind, marked the days and weather, the phases of the moon, the boy's posture, even the bobcat's path. And still, nothing explained it. No animal behavior blog, no wildlife specialist article, no childhood development book. Nothing came close. She once brought a nature expert to the house, discreetly, during the afternoon when the bobcat never came. A quiet woman in her 50s with soft shoes and patient eyes. The expert listened, nodded politely, examined the photos, and said what professionals always say when they don't know. It's likely a series of conditioned behaviors. Perhaps the animal associates your son's presence with safety. But when the mother asked about the mirrored twig arrangements, the expert paused. There could be scent triggers involved. Or perhaps the child mimics shapes the bobcat makes. Children are highly observant. That night, the bobcat didn't come, and the boy was quiet. The next morning, he didn't go outside. He sat on the floor, coloring loops over loops in a spiral that never closed. She scared her, he said softly. The mother knew what he meant. She'll come back, she replied. But the boy only shook his head. Not until I show her I still remember. That afternoon, he returned to the yard. He didn't bring objects this time. He brought motion. He crouched, pressed his palms into the dirt, and began to draw lines with his fingers, long curved trails in the mud. Circles, swirls, waves. Then he stood, stepped away, and sat with his arms around his knees. The wind stirred. Branches shifted. And then, at the very edge of the lawn, it appeared again. Thin, silent, still. But it came. The boy didn't move. Neither did the bobcat. They just looked. A long silence passed. The kind that stretches beyond language. The kind that belongs to things older than speech. Then the bobcat walked forward. It stepped beside the drawn spiral and, with one careful paw, pressed into the line and dragged the swirl outward, extending it like a second signature. Then it stepped back. The boy smiled, not widely, just enough. And the bobcat sat. Minutes passed. Neither moved. Then the boy stood slowly, picked up a single pine needle from the ground, and laid it across the drawn line. The bobcat looked down at the gesture, then lifted its head, turned, and disappeared into the trees. That night, the boy slept deeper than he had in weeks. And the mother, she didn't write anything down. She didn't need to. Some things, she knew now, were not meant to be recorded. They were meant to be held. In the stillness of the following days, something changed. The visits continued, but shorter now. The patterns simpler. The exchanges quieter. The mother began to feel it. A slow closing. Like a chapter ending not with a sentence, but with breath. Then came the morning when the boy didn't wake first. She found him curled against the wall, facing the window, eyes open but still. "She's going," he whispered. The mother knelt beside him. "Where?" She found what she was looking for. He sat up, pulled the blanket around his shoulders, and stood. She followed as he walked to the porch, then out into the wet grass. There, at the place he always sat, something waited. Not the bobcat. Just a circle of leaves, green, fresh, unfallen, placed in a ring, untouched by wind or animal. Inside the ring, a single white stone, shaped almost like a heart, but imperfect, fractured gently down the center. He bent, picked it up, and held it out to her. "She says thank you," he said. The mother took it, and suddenly, so quietly she didn't even realize it had happened, she began to cry. That stone stayed on her nightstand. She didn't polish it, didn't clean the dirt from its center. She left it as it was, raw, chipped, and oddly warm to the touch. Sometimes, late at night, when sleep was far and her thoughts were louder than they should be, she'd press it between her palms and feel stillness return. The boy no longer arranged patterns outside. The visits had stopped. And yet, it didn't feel like absence. It felt like something had settled, like whatever had needed to happen, had. But one morning, a change. The boy stood by the window, very still, his hands gripping the curtain edge. When she walked over, he didn't look at her. He only said, "She's back." And when she followed his gaze to the yard, her breath caught. It was not the bobcat. It was two. The second was smaller, lean, younger, still learning its body, its movements uncertain, stopping every few steps, glancing toward the larger one as if unsure. But the older bobcat didn't look back. It walked calmly toward the clearing where the boy used to sit, turned once in a slow circle, then laid down. The young one lingered at the edge. Then, from the house, the boy stepped outside. No shoes, no coat, just quiet certainty in his bones. He didn't walk to them. He stopped at the porch step and simply sat down. The older bobcat lifted its head, and for a long time nothing moved. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then, the younger one stepped forward, cautiously, paws light against the damp earth. It came halfway across the yard, hesitated, then turned in a slow arc and scratched a crooked spiral in the dirt. The boy smiled. He stood, walked down the steps, and with the flat of his foot, he traced a gentle line outward from that spiral, just as he had done with the older bobcat weeks before. The young animal didn't retreat, didn't blink. It only watched, and the mother, from inside unmoving, felt something rise in her chest that had no name. That night, the boy spoke softly as he brushed his teeth. "She had to leave for a while," he said. "She was teaching." "Teaching what?" his mother asked. "How to talk without words." Later, after he'd fallen asleep, she stepped outside into the cold quiet. The yard was empty, but not blank. The air still carried something. Not presence, exactly, but memory. And there, at the base of the tree, she saw it. A feather, not dropped, placed, black at the base, white at the tip, curved slightly, almost like a question mark. She left it where it was. The days passed quietly. Routine returned. But one afternoon, weeks later, As winter teased the treetops with the promise of snow, the boy brought something home from school. A drawing, crayons on brown paper. It showed a bobcat and a boy, and between them, a long trail of stones and sticks and leaves, forming a line that curled into a circle. When she asked what it was, he said only, "It's how we remember." That night, while folding laundry, she noticed his small plastic binoculars, the ones he used to take on walks, sitting on the floor by the door. She picked them up and turned them over. Inside one of the lenses, tucked carefully between the glass and the casing, was a small piece of paper, folded neatly. She pulled it out, unfolded it slowly. Just one shape, drawn in red crayon. A spiral, open on one end. That same night, something pulled her from sleep. A sound? Not quite. She stepped out of bed and walked to the back window. And there, under the soft blue of moonlight, the young bobcat stood at the edge of the trees, alone, watching. It didn't move forward. It didn't need to, because this time, it wasn't the boy who walked out. It was her. No shoes, no flashlight, just her breath, visible in the cold. She didn't approach. She didn't speak. She stood still. And after a long pause, the animal blinked. Slow. Once. Then it turned and vanished into the woods, silent as snowfall. She never saw it again. But somehow, that felt right. Winter settled over the land like a slow exhale. Snow didn't come all at once. It arrived in fragments, frost at the edges of windows, silver dusting on fence posts, steam rising from every breath. The boys' patterns had long stopped, but the earth still held their memory. Beneath the bare trees, the ground remembered. And so did she. The boy had changed. Not in the way most children do. He was still playful, still kind, still bursting with sudden laughter. But there was something underneath now. A stillness, a kind of listening. The way he paused before entering a room, as if checking for something unseen. The way he turned his head slightly when the wind passed. She never spoke of it again. Not to her husband, not to her neighbors, not even to herself in writing. But she watched. One morning near the end of January, when the wind came from the east and the clouds hung low enough to touch, she found the boy in the attic, sitting quietly, holding a feather, not the one from the tree. A new one, soft gray with black edges, curved. He wasn't playing. He wasn't pretending. He was simply holding it, like a memory that hadn't happened yet. "What are you thinking about?" she asked gently, her voice barely more than a breath. He looked up. "She left it here for me." That afternoon, she searched the attic. Every corner, every beam, and in the farthest corner, beneath an old wool blanket they hadn't used in years, she found tracks. Paw prints. Not fresh, not muddy, imprinted in dust. They led toward the wall, and stopped. She didn't clean them. That night, she sat in the living room beside the fire while the boy colored in silence. He was drawing spirals again, only this time, they ended in arrows. "What do they mean?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, "It's where she's going." The next day, he was quiet, all morning, all afternoon, until just before sunset, when he suddenly stood, walked to the coat rack, and grabbed his boots. "I have to go," he said plainly. "Where?" He pointed to the tree-line. "The place she showed me." The mother hesitated. Her mind moved through 100 reasons to say no, but none came out. Instead, she said only, "Wait." She grabbed her coat, slipped on her shoes, and followed him. The forest swallowed them quickly. There was no trail, no path. Only the boy's sure feet and the sound of twigs cracking under frost. After 10 minutes of walking in silence, they reached a small clearing. It was nothing remarkable. A patch of earth circled by birch and pine, blanketed in fallen needles and touched with patches of snow. And in the center, a circle of stones, carefully arranged. Old, weathered. The boy stepped into the ring and knelt. "She used to come here," he said. "Before me." The mother felt her heart drop. "How do you know?" He didn't look up. "She told me." In that moment, the wind shifted, and something changed. A scent, a memory, a pressure in the air that made her eyes water and her knees go soft. She knelt beside him. There, half buried beneath pine needles and frost, was a piece of red fabric, faded, torn, and clinging to a low stone. She reached out slowly, brushed the debris away. It was part of a small collar. Frayed, barely legible stitching. Hope. The name hit her like a breath she'd been holding since the day this all began. She didn't know how, or why, but that word, hope, burned through her. "She wasn't just here for me," the boy said quietly. "She was here because someone forgot her." The mother turned, her fingers trembling over the fabric. "You mean she belonged to someone?" The boy nodded. "A long time ago." "And what were the patterns?" He looked at her finally, and for the first time, she saw it in his eyes. Something far beyond childhood. "They were reminders," he said, "so no one would forget again." She looked down at the collar in her hands, at the tiny broken thread where a tag must have once been, and suddenly, she remembered a flyer. Years ago, tacked to a pole down the road. Faded. A missing bobcat from a sanctuary 2 towns over. Escaped during a transfer. Presumed lost. They never found her. Until now. The cold pressed against her back, but she didn't move. Not yet. Because there, on the other side of the ring, something shifted. Not a shape. Not a sound. Just the feeling of being seen. She looked up, and for the briefest second, the light moved just right, and she saw it. A figure in the trees. Silent. Still. Watching. But it wasn't the bobcat. It was the young one. The successor. The memory bearer. It stood there, not waiting, not beckoning, but witnessing. And when the boy turned and placed the collar gently on the stone, the animal stepped back into the forest. Gone. Not lost. Released. The boy exhaled, and the wind changed again. The forest held its breath. Morning came in soft layers, mist across the valley, dew on every branch, light slipping between trees like it was afraid to be noticed. The boy stood by the stone, the same one where the collar now rested. Not buried, not displayed, just placed, honored. He didn't speak. He didn't touch it. He only stood, boots rooted to the earth, arms hanging at his sides. The mother waited a few paces behind, watching, not asking, just being. Weeks had passed since they'd seen the young bobcat. No more spirals, no more visits. But the clearing had changed. Not visibly, not in ways a camera could catch, but in silence. Something sacred had been left behind. Every so often, the boy would return here. Never with toys. Never with food. Just himself. Some days, he'd bring a stone. A feather. Once, a single wildflower with its stem curved from frost. He'd place them near the collar. Never on it. It wasn't a shrine. It wasn't grief. It was continuity. He never told anyone else about the bobcats. Not even years later. Not when they moved to another house. Not when new friends asked about strange things he remembered. He would only smile, like someone keeping a promise. And she never pressed. She had witnessed enough. The old house stood empty for some time. Nature crept back, slowly. Vines curling up the porch rails, leaves gathering like letters never opened. Then one winter morning, a man came walking along the old fence line. He was older now, tall, broad-shouldered with dark hair and quiet eyes. He paused near the garden, now overgrown and tangled with bramble. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object. A stone, smooth, white, worn by years of touch. He placed it gently beside a mossy stump, then looked toward the tree line. Nothing moved, and yet a single breeze carried through the clearing. Not cold, not warm, just steady. It brushed the grass in a slow wave. It circled the base of the birch. It passed across the stone, and then it was gone. He smiled, then turned, and walked away. Behind him, the light shifted, barely, but just enough. And if you were there, if you stood completely still, you might have noticed a set of prints appearing in the frost. 4 small pads, wide apart, soft, fresh. They did not walk forward. They circled the stone once, then vanished. No sound, no farewell, only the lingering stillness of something that was once wild, and had once waited, and had once been seen, and now remembered.